Hey, it's Brian. Welcome to the Economic Report. Today's episode is super powerful because we're talking about three super powerful catalysts: Jerome Powell, Big Bird, and Donald Trump. And you're going to want to stick around to the very end because you'll find out exactly how this affects your wallet and how it affects your public perception of what's really going on in D.C. We'll start off with Jerome Powell and the fact that Jerome Powell is getting slammed quite a bit by the Trump administration.
Responding to White House criticism over the Fed's renovation project, writing in a letter to the Director of the Office of Management and Budget, we take seriously the responsibility to be good stewards of public resources as we fulfill the duties given to us by Congress on behalf of the American people. Joining us now from Washington, Mike Shepard. Shep, as we said at the start of this program, this story just won't die.
Eager to keep this one alive because, in a way, they are trying to lay the groundwork for a possible case to move against Powell if President Donald Trump really does want to set up a decision to fire him. At some point, they would need
that Jerome Powell is some way, shape, or form uncooperative, not helping whatsoever when it comes to Federal Reserve interest rates and Federal Reserve policy. Here's the truth. Jerome Powell was actually appointed by Donald Trump way back when to become the Federal Reserve chairman. Number two, the Federal Reserve is supposed to act independently of any other branches of government, particularly the executive branch of government. Number three, and maybe the most important part of this, is the fact that there's a lot of pressure put on Jerome Powell in D.C., and particularly coming out of the president. You'll want to pay attention to this because Jerome Powell is getting a lot of flack because of renovations done to the Federal Reserve buildings, the fact that he's not cooperating, and, of course, some of the terrible name-calling that's happening by the President of the United States.
We have a lot of good people for that job. It's not a tough job, to be honest. Assuming you're smart, it's not a tough job. If you're a dummy, then I guess it's a tough job. But it might be one of the easiest jobs I've ever seen. And now on top of it, he's building a close to $3 billion little nest egg for himself. He's not doing the right job. We should be saving $1 trillion a year on interest. You know, when he talks about cost, we should be saving. Think of it, $1 trillion a year. Add that with the tariffs and everything else. But he just doesn't want. He's a knucklehead.
And the fact is, this is really kind of unpresidential behavior, and maybe you just brush it off as Trump-esque type behavior. But the fact is, it's not right, it's not fair, and it's really not good for U.S. policy. You see, last week, there was talk of replacing Jerome Powell immediately, and that wasn't good for the financial markets, and that's one thing that Donald Trump seems to be paying close attention to. The fact is that when Trump threatened to replace Powell, the markets dropped 1% immediately because even the financial markets in Wall Street, while they kind of do like Donald Trump, what they don't like is the tariff rhetoric, and what they really don't like is the fact that the Federal Reserve could conceivably become a non-independent entity. And what's bad about not being a non-independent entity is the fact that all of a sudden you have a whole bunch of concentration of power under the executive branch of government. We're talking about the executive branch, the legislative branch, the judicial branch, and then finally, holy smokes, the Federal Reserve, and that's good for no one. And of course, what the bigger problem is that nobody in D.C. is really talking about is the fact that the government is spending like way too much money. The big, beautiful bill that was signed into law on July 4th really is symbolic of what's going on in D.C. And the fact is, all the DOGE cuts, all the other cuts that were going on really does affect your wallet because, let's face it, that budget actually is a $3 trillion increase in federal spending. Now, you might find that outrageous, like I do, but it even cuts deeper than that. Let me give you an example. For instance, PBS is being cut. It is the public broadcast system. And so you could conceivably say that the federal government is in the process of plucking the feathers of Big Bird, because he really is the symbol of PBS, but it's even deeper than that. Big Bird is designed as a kid-friendly, education-related character to benefit all of America's children. Sesame Street really is a kid-friendly episode that was supposed to be available to all groups of kids, regardless of financial situations. And PBS really exists in part to do these types of things, reach out to the America's youth and help them get positioned in a place to be successful in life. Of course, it runs a little bit deeper than that. NPR, standing for National Public Radio, also has some issues as well. The people who join PBS or join NPR tend to be people who are not profit-driven. Both of those are considered nonprofit organizations. So the type of people who work there tend to not be after the almighty dollar, which sounds good on top, but if you dig a little bit deeper, the fact is that these people tend to be a little bit more left-leaning, not right-leaning in their political stances. Of course, that makes things very easy for the big, beautiful bill to attack entities like NPR, PBS, and the last bill that was passed by the House and by the Senate and signed into law really does cut into those two entities. Because the bigger problem is the BRICS, that's Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, have a plan up their sleeve. They sit and they watch the United States overspend and overspend and overspend just a little bit more, and together they're trying to build a currency that is an alternate to the US dollar. And that's the real scary thought, because the US dollar affects every aspect of American life. And if the US dollar were to ever lose its reserve currency status, it's bad news for all dollar-based assets. So what the Genius Act does, it's an attempt to create a new cryptocurrency called the U.S. stablecoin, and the U.S. stablecoin really is backed up by U.S. dollars. The idea is that if the U.S. government can be first to market with a currency that is backed by the U.S. dollar and a stablecoin in which all transactions can be done worldwide, then you circumvent any kind of an idea of debasing the U.S. dollar. And of course, the Fed wants control of the stablecoin. The Federal Reserve would love control of the stablecoin. And the U.S. banking system, they're a little bit nervous because this stablecoin represents a completely different type of transaction that has not been done before. And it's getting rid of the old rails and replacing new finance rails. It makes transactions happen faster and more efficiently, and maybe, just maybe, without keeping track of who receives what by banking transactions. So you're here towards the end, and this is kind of where the rubber meets the road. We know the President of the United States is filled with all types of rhetoric, and I'm not saying it's all bad rhetoric. He knows how to stay in the headlines, and he knows how to push a story. That's for sure, but the fact is that we're all affected by inflation, and it seems as though the inflation cycle's not going away. The Federal Reserve is very happy with a 2% inflation rate. They are not happy with anything above 2. They always shoot for a 2% inflation rate. And, of course, when tariffs increase prices, that means everything's going to cost more for the average American. That means higher prices at the grocery store, higher prices for automobiles, and higher prices for energy. And maybe most of all, and maybe most importantly, is really less freedom for you when your dollar doesn't go as far as it could and as far as it should. So you want to pay attention to 3 themes this coming week. You want to pay attention to what's the fallout from Big Bird and NPR cuts and PBS cuts. And finally, Donald Trump's rhetoric about the stable coin, the Federal Reserve, and the future of the U.S. dollar. Hey folks, it's Brian. Thanks for joining me. Make sure you like and subscribe if you find this episode really helpful to you. I'd love to join you. I have shorts and I go live on a daily basis during the week, and I'd love to have you join me. Remember folks, the biggest battle you fight is the one between your ears. Stay healthy, and I will talk to you next episode. Take care.